Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
For the booze. We're back
We are.
for another episode. I don't even think did I even tell you what we were doing this week?
You didn't. You told me a roundabout kind of what it was, but not exactly what it was.
Well, this one's kind of special in a way because you know what? We're going to get to that. Let me run this back because we actually got a listener email and I asked him if it would be okay if I read it, and he said that was fine with him. So let me pull it up. This was from, we'll just use his first name. This is from a listener named Joe, and he says, "Hey y'all, Crescent is my favorite paranormal hotspot, and I just found it last year. They went 4 times.
Wow.
The first time we went with Ghost Hunts USA, so they were okay. Not real professional, to be honest, and kind of hated the attitudes. My fiance and I had more experiences when we broke off from the group after their guided tour. J Block, we had a lot of experiences. Knocks in the upper corners of the cell blocks, and we investigated, and my fiance had a feeling that she wanted to hurt someone, so we got the hell out of there. I got my butt groped as well. I'm a dude, so do what you want with that. We were led to a cell block on the upper level. Taylor had her arm caressed this time. We went again over Halloween and learned Ghost Hunts USA is no longer affiliated. Crescent has their own guides and local groups help out. This, in my opinion, was a lot better. We got a lot of intelligent responses on the Ghost Box and Spirit Talker app. Our scariest response being what sounded like an inhuman growl in the chapel. So that's in regards to our Crescent episode.
Yeah.
And I guess they had a lot of experiences and they find it very creepy. So
That's super cool.
if people are going out there and having real experiences there, then that just kind of solidifies what we already said. We do think it's haunted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if anybody else out there has any stories of places that you've been that we've talked about, write in and we'll read your experiences.
Thank you, Joe, so much for sending that in. That was super
Absolutely.
cool to hear a personal experience from there.
We've talked back and forth a few times, and he gave us a group to check out on YouTube, so we'll be doing that soon.
Nice.
And maybe if there's enough, maybe we'll cover them in an episode.
Heck yeah.
But on to the show. This week, we went back to England. I had a hard time last time, but because this place is so well known, it was a little easier to find some information. And this is actually the very first paranormal thing I ever learned about.
Ooh.
I was a little kid. I found it in the library, I believe. But yeah, this was the first real life paranormal thing that I had ever encountered in text somewhere. And it's over in England in Norfolk. And we are going to visit it's a very, very, I would be very surprised if a lot of people did not know what this was. But we're going to Raynham Hall.
Oh.
Now, Raynham Hall is the site of the most famous ghost picture of all time.
Really?
And it is almost 100 years old at this point, taken way, way back when. And the problem that this place has to date is that the family, it's like a royal kind of bloodline that lives there.
Okay.
And you can't just go in there. They still live there. So there's not any that I could find paranormal investigations and stuff like that.
Wow.
So we just have to go off of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, I think we should get into this one.
Well, that was already super interesting, and I am excited.
We're going way back in time for this one.
Awesome. Let's do it.
The area that was to become Norfolk was settled in pre-Roman times, with camps along the higher land in the west, where flints could be quarried. A Brittonic tribe, the Iceni, emerged in the 1st century BC. The Iceni revolted against the Roman invasion in AD 47, and again in 60, led by Boudica, queen of the Iceni British tribe. The crushing of the Second Rebellion opened the area to the Romans. During the Roman era, roads and ports were constructed throughout the area, and farming was widespread. Situated on the east coast, the homelands of the Iceni were vulnerable to attacks from continental Europe and other parts of Britain, and forts were built to defend against raids by the Saxons and the Picts. A period of depopulation, which may have been due to these threats, seemed to have followed the departure of the Romans. Soon afterward, Germanic people from the North Sea area settled in the region. Though they became known as Angles, they were likely not affiliated to any tribes in particular at the time of their migration. It is thought that the settlement here was early, possibly beginning at the start of the 5th century, thereby preceding the alleged date of Hengist of Horsa's arrival in Kent, and that occurred on a large scale. By the 5th century, the Angles established control of the region and later became the, quote, North Folk and the South Folk, hence Norfolk and Suffolk. Norfolk, Suffolk, and several adjacent areas became the Kingdom of East Anglia, which later merged with Mercia and then with Wessex. In the centuries before the Norman conquest, the wetlands of the east of the country began to be converted to farmland, and settlements grew in these areas. Migration to East Anglia must have been high. By the time of the Domesday Book survey, it was one of the most densely populated parts of the British Isles. During the High and Late Middle Ages, the county developed arable agriculture and woolen industries. Norfolk's prosperity at the time is evident from the country's large number of medieval churches. The economy was in decline by the time of the Black Death, which dramatically reduced the population in 1349. Kett's Rebellion occurred in Norfolk during the reign of Edward VI, largely in response to the enclosure of the land by landlords, leaving peasants with nowhere to graze their animals, and to the general abuses of power by nobility. It was led by Robert Kett, a yeoman farmer, who was joined by recruits from Norwich and the surrounding countryside. His group numbered some 16,000 by the time the rebels stormed Norwich on July 29, 1549, and took the city. Kett's rebellion ended on August 27th when the rebels were defeated by an army under the leadership of John Dudley, 1st Duke of Northumberland, at the Battle of Dussindale. Some 3,000 rebels were killed and Kett was captured, held in the Tower of London, tried for treason, and hanged from the walls of Norwich Castle. By the late 16th century, Norwich had grown to become the second largest city in England, but over 1/3 of its population died in the plague epidemic of 1579. And in 1665, the Great Plague again killed around 1/3 of the population. During the English Civil War, Norfolk was largely parliamentarian. The economy and agriculture of the region declined somewhat. During the Industrial Revolution, Norfolk developed little industry, except in Norwich, which was a late addition to the railway network. For nearly 400 years, Raynham Hall has been the seat of the Townsend family. The hall gave its name to 5 estate villages, known as the Raynhams, reported to be haunted, providing the scene for possibly the most famous ghost photo of all time, the famous brown lady descending the staircase. However, the ghost has been allegedly seen infrequently since the photo was taken. 100 years ahead of its time, work was started on Raynham Hall in 1619 by Sir Roger Townsend, an untrained gentleman architect who was inspired by the work of Inigo Jones. The plans and siding were highly accomplished. Following the trauma of the English Civil War, the family played an important part in the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. Sir Horatio Townsend, younger brother of Sir Roger, accompanied the newly restored King Charles II back to England from the Netherlands. His relationship with the Stuart king would continue to flourish, seeing Sir Horatio ascend first to the title of Baron and ultimately to Viscount. In 1671, Raynham Hall was visited by King Charles II, his younger brother James, Duke of York, and the royal entourage. The great honor was the sign of the family's social and political standing. The extensive park of over 800 acres was laid out by the first Viscount during this time. On his death, it was said that Raynham Hall was now, quote, the noblest pile among us. Raynham Hall underwent significant change in the early 18th century under the direction of the second Viscount, Charles Turnip Townsend. and was considered the earliest example of a Paladin style in Norfolk. The hall's grand central entrance and sweeping staircases were constructed at this time, as were many of the remarkable interior designs that can still be seen to this day. The second Viscount held numerous political offices, including Secretary of State for the Northern Department and Lord President of the Council. His championing of the agricultural innovations of the time, such as the Norfolk system of crop rotation, were to fuel the British agricultural revolution. In 1713, Charles Townshend, 2nd Viscount Townshend, married Robert Walpole's prettiest sister, Dorothy. She was his second wife and is reputed in the gossip of the time to have been previously the mistress of Lord Wharton, quote,
whose character was so infamous, and his lady's complacent subserviency so notorious, that no young woman could be 24 hours under their roof with safety to her reputation.
Because her husband was convinced he had reason to believe she had been having an extramarital affair, he had her locked up in a room of the hall and denied her access to her own children. She would eventually suffer a miserable and painful death of smallpox. Lady Townshend was buried in 1726. Walpole was Townshend's neighbor in Norfolk as well as his brother-in-law, but political and personal rivalry between them was exacerbated by Walpole's building of Houghton Hall. As Lord Hervey observed, quote,
Lord Townshend looked upon his own seat at Raynham as the metropolis of Norfolk, and considered every stone that augmented the splendor of Houghton as a diminution of the grandeur of Raynham.
The sons of the third Viscount thrust the Townshend family further onto the national and indeed international political stage. George Townshend, the third Viscount's eldest son, had a distinguished military career. He served as Viceroy of Ireland from 1767 to 1771, and in 1787 was elevated to the title of Marquis Townshend. The second son of the third Viscount was Charles Townshend, who became Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1772. He passed the infamous legislation that would tax American colonists on paper, glass, paint, and tea. Known as the Townshend Acts, these bills resulted in the Boston Tea Party and were to be the catalyst to the American Revolution. Through marriage, the family acquired Balls Park in Hertfordshire, which became the principal residence for many years and saw Raynham Hall taking on more of a secondary role for a number of years. The family returned permanently to Raynham in the early 20th century, and it has been the home ever since. Members of the family continued to dedicate their lives to public service, with both the fourth and the fifth Marquises serving as members of Parliament before their eventual entry into the House of Lords. During the Second World War, Raynham Hall was acquisitioned by the British military. Now, there are still bullet holes in the top floor of the house as a reminder of the presence of soldiers during those years. The family continued to live alongside the troops until the end of the war. Raynham is not generally open to public, but the present Lord and Lady Townshend have created a restoration fund for individual projects and items in the collection, and open the house every year to a series of wonderful recitals in the Marble Hall, and for several open days in which you can have a tour of the house. The gentleman architect Sir Roger Pratt visited the hall after Sir Roger Townshend's death in 1637 and wrote, quote,
Not long after it was built, I was some while in it while I had no ornaments at all. There was someone in it divine in the symmetry of proportion of length, height, and breadth, which was harmonious to the rational soul.
Sir Nicholas Pevsner, not often inclined to airing personal views, wrote that, quote, is the paramount house of state in Norfolk. It is also, especially as seen from the west up to the avenue, one of the most attractive of the major houses in the county. Warm and comfortable looking, in spite of its size. Moreover, it is not a local style,
but is a provincial hybrid introducing to the county the classism of Inigo Jones himself at the start of his career.
And lastly, John Julius, Viscount Norwich, quote,
The architecture of southern England neatly encapsulates what most visitors feel. In all England, there are few more beautiful houses than Raynham, and none, perhaps, that so perfectly exemplifies all that is best in English domestic architecture in the first half of the 17th century. Raynham is not palatial. There is a comfortable, homely feeling about it. It is a house designed not only to be admired, but also to be loved.
On September 19th, 1936, Captain Hubert C. Provend and his assistant, Indre Shira, visited Raynham Hall for a photography assignment. They photographed all over the place, including the famous stairwell. Provend's head was already underneath the black cloth, which was attached to his camera, when his assistant suddenly saw something he couldn't believe. He urged his boss to snap the camera straight away, and the ghost of the brown lady was captured forever. It was first published in the magazine Country Life in that same year. Many have claimed that the photograph was fake, resembling a statue of the Virgin Mary. However, this picture is still the best-known photograph ever taken of a spirit. And that leads us to today. Not much has changed at the Hall over these many years. It is still famously known as the home of the Brown Lady, and maybe a few other resident spirits that we'll hear about. With the history of the land soaked in blood-filled battles long ago, plagues, raids, and just the death rate at the time before modern medicine was available, one could see how something may be lingering there. What do you think? Could all the deaths during the battles and plagues left something behind? Would they have been able to actually fake such a solid piece of evidence all the way back then? Some questions we will never have answers to, but one thing is for sure. If the rumors are true, you're never truly alone when you visit the legendary Raynham Hall.
Wow, that was a very in-depth, way, way back history. I think absolutely the longest history we've done. And might I just say,
Yes.
the architecture that is in England is much different from what is here.
I'd imagine.
And it's also very elaborate and beautiful. I mean, maybe not all of it, but a lot of the older stuff.
A lot of it is. It's
the way,
older.
Yeah. But the way they paint this house is like above and beyond, especially for its time. That is impressive.
It is. All right, so think of this house when you envision Raynham Hall, and it looks a lot like the mansion in the show Ghosts.
Really?
Yes, not exactly the same, but you could imagine something quite like that.
Yeah.
It's very same kind of architectural style and everything. It's pretty sweet.
Super cool. Heck yeah.
It's even down the end of like a long driveway, just like in the show. So, it's pretty cool, and there is a lot of history, but it's England. I mean, it is. We could probably go back farther, but the only reason I even put all that history in was because of all of the like battling and people just being murdered and plagues, and because we got to like talk about all of the things that could have led to death on the land, and there was a lot.
Absolutely.
You know, so the Danes came in and murdered people all the way back then, so it was just a lot. There's just a lot of history there, but the house itself it's just so weird to me that it has one of the most famous pictures ever taken, but in a house that you can't go into.
Yeah.
Well, you can't go in and like explore. You can go in, but
I would absolutely love to do a tour of that house just to see it, but I think it's super cool that the family that it was built for still lives there to this day.
They're noble blood, so they're probably never going to not live there.
That's so cool.
So, hey man, it's very cool. It is very old history, and there's a lot. I mean, like I said, I could have did a lot more, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, you gave us lots of death on the land. That's for sure.
And this is the first paranormal thing I can remember. I remember seeing this picture in a book when I was in elementary school.
That's crazy.
This picture's been around since 1936.
36, I think you said,
I'm pretty sure.
Or 39, something like that.
36. It's actually right on here. 1936. So, I mean, it's almost 100 years old. So it's been around.
Crazy. That's so crazy.
But there are some stories and a little bit of deeper dive into who and what and why the brown lady that I think we should get into.
Really?
I do. But
it's time.
I think we're going to have to take an ad break first.
And now, Booze Crew, back to our show. 85 years ago, a picture of the fabled Brown Lady of Raynham was taken by country life photographers. Was it really the ghost of Lady Dorothy Walpole, an 18th century mistress of the manor? On September 19th, 1936, country life photographers on assignment at Raynham Hall in Norfolk took what is probably history's most famous example of spirit photography. The ethereal, veiled form they captured gliding down the hall's main staircase is widely believed to be the fabled Brown Lady of Raynham. Some people may be familiar with this image, but most will not know that less than a year before it was taken, the incumbent lady of the house, Gladys Dogger Marconius Townsend, published the book of true ghost stories. She wrote, quote,
I must confess, I believe in ghosts, and for many years lived in a definitely haunted house.
She was neither the first aristocrat homeowner to hold such beliefs, nor the first to write about them. 200 miles north of Raynham is Chillingham Castle on Northumberland, the former home of American-born Countess Lenora Tankerville. Lady Lenora began documenting spectral sightings at her 13th century home as early as 1895. In fact, her first supernatural experience of the aptly named Chillingham came in a dream, months before she took up residence. In a dream, Lady Lenora's deceased brother-in-law, whom she had never met but recognized from photographs, greeted her at the gates of her soon-to-be home. When she finally visited the place in the flesh, she mused, quote,
This is the second time I find myself approaching the gates of Chillingham Castle, but strangely, it's the first time I have actually been there.
By 1925, she had amassed enough material to fill an entire guidebook. For both women, an interest in the supernatural was in keeping with the contemporary fashion of spiritualism. Yet, they had a special investment in ghosts, particularly the ones that associated with their own homes. This was an age in which loss and decay hung over many formerly splendid residences, and for struggling owners, a haunted history was one way to stay connected to an illustrious past. A portrait, identified as Lady Dorothy, hung in the hall until it was sold in 1904. The woman is dressed in brown brocade trimmed in yellow, with a ruff around the throat. Her eyes are large and shining. It was rumored that the portrait looked normal when seen during the day, but if seen by candlelight, the face became evil-looking and skull-like with no eyes. Numerous stories of encounters with the Brown Lady have been recorded over the centuries. One of the most famous occurred in the early 19th century, when George IV, then regent, visited at the hall and was given the state bedroom. He awoke in the middle of the night to see a woman dressed in brown, with disheveled hair and a face of ashy paleness, standing beside the bed. he was so frightened that he vowed he would not stay. Quote,
"Another hour in this accursed house."
The brown lady was also seen at Christmas time, 1835, by Colonel Loftus, one of the many guests staying at the hall. Loftus saw the ghost twice on succeeding nights. The first time, she was standing outside of Lady Townsend's room. When pursued by Loftus, she went down the corridor and vanished. The second night, he encountered her on the staircase. She was carrying a lamp. He described her as a stately lady in a rich brocade with a coif in her hair, but only empty, dark, hollow eyes. Loftus made a sketch of her, which he showed to guests at breakfast the following morning. Not long after that, Captain Frederick Marriott, a novelist, was invited to the hall. Marriott had a weak theory that the ghost was somehow connected to smugglers and poachers who once had been prevalent in the area. One night, he and two of Lord Charles Townsend's nephews came face to face with the brown lady in a corridor. She held a lighted lamp and grinned at Marriott in what he termed, quote, a diabolical manner. He was carrying a pistol, which he raised and shot it at the ghost point blank. The ghost had disappeared. He later swore the bullet passed right through her. It was found lodged in a door behind where the ghost had stood. Following that episode, the brown lady was not reported again until 1926, when she was encountered by then Marquis Townsend, who was a boy at the time, and one of his friends. Without a doubt, the brown lady is the hall's most popular resident ghost. She was reported to have been locked up in the residence by her jealous husband, and is believed this is one of those reasons why she still haunts the Raynham Hall staircase. The photograph is respected among paranormal enthusiasts. However, it also has its share of skeptics who label the photo a fake. Some photo experts have claimed that it is the result of double exposure, or two images put together to form the figure of a spirit ascending the stairs. There were so many reports that Lady Dorothy was abused and maltreated by her husband. However, papers uncovered in the 1960s point to the contrary. Evidence suggests that she lived a happy and fulfilling life. She was buried in 1726. However, many people believe that she did not die in that year, and that the funeral was nothing but a farce. They believed she was locked up by her husband in the house. There have been sightings of other ghosts as well, although they are lesser known than that of Dorothy. Other apparitions are the caretaker and his cocker spaniel, two ghostly children, and the ghost of Duke of Monmouth. James Scott was the illegitimate son of King Charles II of England. Monmouth was accused of high treason in 1683 because of a conspiracy to kill his father, the king. Monmouth, who was born in Rotterdam, was forced to flee from England and seek shelter in the Netherlands. He returned to England after his father's death to claim the English throne, which then belonged to his uncle, King Jacob II. He even claimed his father was killed by Jacob II by poison. He was arrested on July 15, 1685, and was executed at Tower Hill not long after. It took 8 blows with an axe to take off his head. After he was buried, people suddenly realized the man never had a portrait, so they exhumed his body, sewed his head back on, and portraited him after all. Others claim Jacob II didn't have the heart to kill his own nephew, The Duke of Monmouth is said to have been transported off to France to be imprisoned at one of King Louis XIV's prisons. To hide his identity, he wore a mask, giving him the nickname
The Man in the Iron Mask.
However, the identity of the man in the Iron Mask was never revealed, and there are more historical figures that could have been him. But why would the Duke of Monmouth haunt Raynham Hall? One may think it is the friendship between Sir Roger Townsend and King Charles II, but who really knows? Over the years, this extraordinary image called the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall has been the cornerstone of countless claims for the supernatural. Now, 70 years after the picture was taken at Raynham Hall in Norfolk, a leading paranormal investigator has stumbled across evidence that it is indeed fake. Alan Murdy, a barrister and also a researcher into the supernatural, found the evidence in a dusty folder in the manuscripts department of Cambridge University Library. The file details an exhaustive investigation into the phenomenon shortly after the image was taken. Conducted by the Society for Psychical Research, it concludes that there is almost certainly a mundane explanation for the spectral image in the photo. The evidence includes the discovery that the camera may have leaked light onto the photographic plate. A descendant of Lady Walpole, the Hon Jonathan Walpole, said even if it wasn't his ancestor in the photo, she may well still be haunting the hall. Quote,
The father of one of my friends swore that she walked past him on the staircase once.
so was this photo a hoax? Probably, though faking the photograph in 1936 involved more than just loading it into Photoshop. Grease could have been put on the lens, or perhaps a double exposure was made. But Captain Provind was a reputable London photographer, and his story and Shira's were identical, and Country Life is hardly the National Enquirer. Other explanations should at least be entertained. Was the brown lady some strange optical phenomenon in the house? Or some kind of time-space overlap? Or could she have been the actual ghost of the former lady of the house, locked up in a room because of infidelity by a jealous husband? Unfortunately, there's not much to go on these days, as the house is still owned by the family Townsend and not open to the public. You can, however, book a date to go there and see the home. A tour, perhaps, or high tea, so there will be no modern-day evidence that we would normally have doing a location like this. There's no TripAdvisory reviews to read, no EVPs to listen to, and no investigations to research. This one truly is up to you. The most compelling piece of evidence you get for this one is a photograph of a spectral woman floating down the staircase in the 1930s. So, what do you think about Raynham Hall? Is Dorothy still haunting the halls of her home? Is the man in the iron mask still looking for revenge? But we think the most important question of all of these is this one even real?
And that is Raynham Hall. And it is the very first ghost anything that I ever came across.
First ghostly stuff ever, really, I think.
Not
Evidence-wise?
Evidence-wise, yes.
Yes.
Evidence-wise, yes. Documented, I would say,
Yeah.
yes. But actually, I don't know if that's completely true. Because we'd have to go back and listen to our episode on the Bell Witch Cave, because I think that was in the 1600s.
That might be.
It might be.
Yeah.
But this is the actual first, I think, physical proof in a picture or something like that.
A photograph.
And this picture really is impressive. It really is. I would hate for this thing to be fake.
Right.
Because it is super cool. It is literally a transparent woman floating down the staircase.
Okay. I have not seen this photo.
All right.
And I think
I'll pull it up.
as part of our Is It Real segment,
Okay.
I need to have the full view.
Okay. I'm going to get it for you.
Okay.
All right. Let me see. So this is the picture of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall taken in 1936.
Okay.
It looks good, in my opinion. I want it to be real.
Yeah. Wow.
So like you had,
Interesting.
like you had even read in your story, you couldn't just go load something up into Photoshop at the time
Yeah,
and
definitely not.
manipulate it, right? So
Right.
in order to fake a photograph in 1936, I don't even think it was like a surefire thing if you tried to manipulate it, because grease on the lens, to me, I feel like wouldn't come through quite like that, because that looks like a person.
I see, and that's why I wanted to look at it, because that, bringing up the grease on the lens, I'm like, okay, so does it seem like it's on the lens of the photo? Does it seem like it's in the photo? Does
It's
it,
glowing.
like
The only thing I could say is that they said it kind of looks like a statue of the Virgin Mary, and it does.
I can see that.
It does
for sure.
But a lot of women back then did look like that.
Right. The way they dressed and the way they carried themselves.
That was the style of the time. Like, women back then weren't liberated quite like women are today.
Right.
So they all had this kind of stuffy kind of demeanor about them. And so I don't know. I want it to be real. Like I said, I was probably 8 years old when I came across this the first time. And I was like, whoa, that's really spooky.
That's so crazy.
It scared the crap out of me. But Raynham Hall look how much history is at this place.
Yeah.
It was the site of the catalyst of the American Revolution. Lots of people died there. The plague came through twice.
Right.
The Vikings came in and destroyed them. The World War II soldiers acquisitioned the house and stayed in there. There is no telling how many people died on the grounds of Raynham Hall.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of that to take into consideration when we discuss this, because while we are ultimately debating a picture, it's more than just a picture. And there are claims of other ghosts there. I couldn't find a whole lot. I could only find a mention of the man and his dog. I also think I might have come across something that says that Charles II Viscount, I believe, still haunts the place. But there's not, the Brown Lady kind of takes the spotlight, and that's what everybody writes about. It's hard to find other claims, stories.
But you got to think too, like, if this place is haunted and holds the energy for that, a caretaker who lived there on the grounds, like.
I mean, it could be anybody.
Right.
It could be anybody. The amount of history here is ridiculous. Not to mention, the thing that really comes to my mind is, like, I feel like, okay, if it was, of all people, she was the one who literally was locked up and basically tortured.
Yeah.
She was taken away from her children, and then she got smallpox,
sad.
and they left her in this room to die by herself.
Yeah.
And
So sad.
I couldn't find any claim that solidified her having an affair with this Lord Wharton. It was basically just a claim somebody made. And there is actually another story online that says it was possible she was set up by Lady Wharton.
Ooh.
So it didn't even happen. But they said that Dorothy Walpole was so beautiful that it was just hard to resist her.
It's hearsay. Sorry, Dorothy.
Yeah, I agree.
Good Lord.
I agree. It's jealousy that got her killed, if that's what happened. Because, again, it says in the 1960s, papers were uncovered that said she lived a long, fulfilling life. But the one thing we know about history is it's written by, people. And you can lie, just like anything else. So,
Oh, yeah.
History is written by the winners, unfortunately. Not always entirely by truth. So, Raynham Hall, very cool. It's very different.
Super cool.
I just, I don't know. I just wanted to do this place because, like I said, it was the first photo of, like, paranormal that I can remember all the way back to Little Stephen.
Like, you see like all these pictures, and, like, in the paranormal community, there is so much now, and it's kind of cool to, like, take it back to the beginning, know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I could find enough information on it, I would totally, like, cover the house where the pantry ghost was.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I could be honest. I don't know if I would, though, because I think grown-up me thinks it's fake. But, man, the videos are so creepy, man.
They are creepy.
They are super creepy.
But, again, the picture at Raynham Hall of the Brown Lady,
yes,
there is no computer technological.
There isn't.
And they even said in the story, like, The man was under the black cloth. Like you, as soon as I say that, I know you envision the camera, the type of camera that's being taken on. Like, come on.
And I think another impressive thing about this is that these men from this magazine, they did not go there to report on paranormal activity.
Right.
They were there just to do like an expose on the property, on the Townsend home.
And the house and the family. And
so this wasn't like, they weren't searching for a ghost.
Right.
They were there just trying to do a story on Raynham Hall and the Townsends. And this just happened. And it was even stated that I did kind of take a glance at the original article from Country Magazine in 1936. They were sent there. Basically, this picture was gathered by luck. This was not supposed to be the story that ran. Mm-hmm. This had nothing to do with what they were going there for. So that's impressive. Because these old-timey cameras, if they're in there putting grease on the lens, somebody's going to notice. It takes forever to take a picture with one of those things.
Right.
That's why everybody looks so unhappy in those pictures, because you're sitting there forever.
Like 45 minutes later, you get one picture.
That's ridiculous. That's why everybody in old black and white photos looks so miserable.
I'm sure.
Because they're tired of sitting there. And I think even farther back than that, well, no, it might have been right around the same time, maybe a little after, but like Wild West photos, I think it was like an hour. You had to just sit there.
That's so crazy.
But you couldn't move. You had to just sit there.
Ugh.
Couldn't move.
No thanks.
Yeah, that sucks.
I'll take my 1 second photos.
Yeah, not even. That's not even a second. But anyways, so that's all the history and the spooky stories. And I think that there's really only one more thing left to do. And that is it real? Well, me, myself, and I was just about to ask her. That's why I hit the button. Well, Megan, what do you think of Raynham Hall and the Brown Lady and the Man in the Iron Mask? Which I don't know if you noticed, but there was a lot of crossovers between like stuff that happened on Game of Thrones and the old Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Man in the Iron Mask. A lot of these stories came from here. There's just a lot of history. But what do you think about the paranormal stuff at Raynham Hall?
I think we always talk about the energy that a place has and the things that happen there, can trap certain things. I think this place went through and saw a lot of death. And I truly think that this photo is real. I think it was totally by accident. And this house might not be, super crazy haunted like Waverly Hills or anything, but
it always goes back to Waverly Hills.
Well, I mean, almost everybody that goes there has something happen. So, but no, I think there are just things that happen there, and it may not be this big, huge, crazy thing, but I mean, these people living in the 1930s taking pictures of the camera with a black cloth draped over you, like, I highly doubt that was their intention. And I don't know. I think it's really cool, actually. I really do. I think it's super neat.
Oh, it is. It's definitely cool.
So, yes. I think it's real.
10 minutes ago, you said you weren't sure.
I know.
Actually, when the mics were off, I'm pretty sure you mouthed to me.
I don't
know if this one's real.
I don't know. But I think...
I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I do. I think it's real. What about you?
Well, I've always wanted to believe it's real because I think somewhere in my mind, every time I see a piece of paranormal evidence, like a photo, I think this is like what I compare it to because it's the first thing that pops into mind because of when I was a kid. It was the first thing I ever saw. With that being said, though, I'm not entirely sure about the photo, honestly. I could see it being legitimate, or I could also see it being a double exposure with like a statue. Because it's just so perfectly statuesque in the photo. Just the way it is. It's all, one solid color. The pose of it. But that's not to say, like, somebody couldn't have been captured in that same kind of, pose coming down the stairs. I'm not sure. But as far as the house goes, I mean, I could totally see this place being haunted just because of all the stuff that's happened there throughout the years. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't say, I believe this place is incredibly haunted. What I'm saying is I'm going to give it like a 50-50 this run because I could totally see something being here, but I could see the argument that something was faked. But I also have a really hard time thinking that nothing is going on there because it's England, for one. And England, I'm not trying to like be stereotypical, but a lot of these homes that have been around for hundreds of years, all of them seem to have claims. Like, we're going to end up doing Chillingham Castle one day. And that was right there, and it had ties to it. And I don't know if you noticed when you were reading, it also had ties to Loftus.
Yes, I did.
Okay, and that's ties to Loftus Hall. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to say a very seesaw kind of an answer. But I do want it to be very real. Yeah, but with nobody being able to go in there now, and I can't find any stories about the Townsends of today speaking about anything going on there. It's really hard to say whether or not because we have 100-year-old evidence, you know. So I'll say yes just for the sake of it, for younger me to be appeased and happy by it. but I feel like it could go either way. So
I can see that for sure.
Oh, great. So I guess with that being said, it's going to get something this week, and it's going to get
the big old seal of approval.
Yeehaw. I like how you said it too. The big old. So yeah, it's going to get it. I think it's fair to say. And if anybody out there listening has ever been there, because we do have some listeners in England. If you've ever been there and maybe you had an experience, or even if you knew somebody who had an experience, let us know. Yeah. You know, we'll talk about it and we'll read about it. Just like Joe sent in his email. Joe? Oh, man. Joe. I'm a dirtbag.
Joe.
Was it Joe?
Yeah.
All right. So I got it right the first time. So, I mean, yeah. If you ever want us to mention you hit us up. And that is Raynham Hall in Norfolk.
Super cool. I really enjoyed this.
Which, hey, how cool is it that all you had to do to get a town name back then was to be the North Folk or the South Folk?
I know. That's true. I mean, pretty easy.
I guess. It's pretty easy. So, where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at @forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at forthebooze.
You can also find us on Twitter at forthebooze and even over on YouTube where people are actually listening to us on. I never thought that would have happened.
And subscribing.
I know. 12 of you. God bless you.
12 of you.
God bless you, 12 people.
Thank you.
And I haven't told you this yet, I don't think, but they have requested that maybe we start a video thing over there where we watch episodes of YouTube investigators and television shows and talk about whether or not we think they're real, but in an actual video format. Oh. And I actually think this is a pretty cool idea. We have the stuff to do it.
Yeah, we do.
So all we got to do is set up a camera to this thing and boom, boom, we're ready to go. So
intriguing idea.
I'll tell you what, you guys comment at us or email us and let us know what you think. Would you be interested in like maybe one video a week where we watch, we'll take suggestions from the listeners. Who do you want us to watch? Or do you have a specific episode you want us to watch? And
good idea.
Yeah, we'll talk about whether or not we think it's real, but we'll do a video on it. It'll probably be super low budget because I don't know how to edit video, but hey, we can just record it and throw it up like almost like a live thing, but not. So I think that'd be cool. But just let us know, email us, tweet at us, and I don't know, Instagram us, all the things.
All the things. And while you're at it, listener suggestions and your paranormal stories or not paranormal stories.
Where can they send them?
They can send them
to fortheboost12@gmail.com.
Yep.
To that website.
That website.
There. That email, man, we are doing rough tonight.
We are on it tonight.
On that email that we've had for over a year now.
The email, yes.
And don't forget to rate and review 5 stars, leave a comment, or don't leave a comment either way, but it really does help us start to get ahead a little bit. And I guess that's going to be the show. So
I guess that's it.
I guess it's going to be time to head on out. We got an interview to go do.
I know, we do.
Yeah, we're going to be
more
on another
on that
show
next week.
Yeah, we're going to be on another show. Woo!
Well, thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate you so very much, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye.